It started not with a scream, but with silence. In a narrow street under the oppressive heat of July, a woman stepped out of her house. She did not speak. She simply began to move, a rhythmic, twitching motion that would soon consume a city. This was not a festival. There was no music playing in the air, no celebration in the hearts of the people. Yet, within weeks, hundreds would join her. They would dance until their feet bled, until their hearts exploded, until they dropped dead. We often think of the past as a time of simple plagues and wars, but in 1518, the city of Strasbourg faced something far stranger. This was the dancing plague, and for those trapped in its grip, there was no way to stop. To understand this madness, we must first look at the city itself. Strasbourg was a jewel of the Holy Roman Empire, a bustling metropolis of timber and stone. But beneath the surface of this prosperous trading hub, a deep rot was beginning to spread. The summer of 1518 did not start with dancing. It started with hunger. The previous harvests had failed miserably. Bread prices skyrocketed. In the shadowed corners of the city, orphans begged for scraps, their ribs pressing against their skin like cage bars. The smell of unwashed bodies and open sewers mingled with the terrifying scent of starvation that hung heavy in the stagnant air. The people were already broken. Their bodies were weak, their minds fractured by the relentless struggle just to stay alive. Syphilis was stalking the alleyways. The church warned of divine punishment. Anxiety was not just a feeling, it was a physical weight pressing down on every chest. The psychological infrastructure for a disaster was perfectly laid out, waiting for a single spark to ignite it. That spark came in mid-July. Frau Troffea opened her door and walked into the cobbled lane. There was no music, yet she began to twist and turn. Her face was devoid of expression, her eyes staring blankly at a horror only she could see. It was a Tuesday. The sun was already high. She was not a dancer by trade. She was a weary woman worn down by poverty. Yet something snapped. She stepped into the alley, and her body began to jerk in a rhythm only she heard. Her neighbors watched from their windows, confused and frightened. Was she possessed? Was she mad? She spun in circles, her heavy skirts kicking up dust. Hours passed. The sun beat down mercilessly, yet she did not stop to drink, to eat, or to rest. Night fell, bringing no relief. The only sound was the rhythmic thud of her feet against the stone. Blood began to soak through her shoes. Her husband pleaded with her to stop, but she couldn't hear him. She was locked in a prison of motion. By the third day, the exhaustion should have killed her. Instead, something even more terrifying happened. Others began to step out of their homes. Their movements were jerky, involuntary, mirroring her own. The contagion had jumped from one mind to another. It wasn't a graceful waltz. It was a grotesque parody of dance. Limbs flailed awkwardly. Heads bobbed with violent intensity. The silence of the street was replaced by the heavy panting of dancers and the weeping of families watching their loved ones surrender. This was not a virus carried by rats or fleas. This was a pathogen of the mind. Fear and suggestion were doing what biology could not. The sight of the dancing triggered a dormant switch in the brains of the desperate observers. Imagine the visual horror. Red blood splashing onto grey stones. Brown wool tunics stained dark with perspiration. The sky above was a brilliant, indifferent blue, offering no clouds to shield them from the punishing summer sun that baked the city alive. The sounds were haunting. There was no orchestra yet, just the slapping of feet, the gasping for air, and the occasional shriek of pain as a muscle tore or a bone fractured. It was the sound of human bodies being ground into dust. Within a week, 30 people were dancing. Within a month, there were 400. The sheer scale of the affliction overwhelmed the senses. The narrow streets of Strasbourg were clogged with a writhing mass of humanity, united in a macabre ritual. The market squares, usually filled with merchants selling grain and cloth, were now arenas of suffering. The crowds pressed in, a mixture of morbid curiosity and paralyzing fear. The air grew thick with the dust kicked up by hundreds of bleeding feet. It is a mistake to think of this as a party. These people were not smiling. Their faces were masks of sheer terror. They were screaming for the movement to stop, begging for mercy, even as their legs continued to thrash. Look closely at their eyes. They were wide, unblinking, fixed on nothingness. Many were in a trance state, completely dissociated from the physical agony destroying their bodies. They were prisoners in their own skin, driven by a force they could not name. Their feet were the first casualties. Leather shoes wore through in hours, then the skin abraded, then the muscle. Bloody footprints marked the cobblestones in complex patterns, a gruesome record of the mania that had taken hold of their limbs. Dehydration set in. Tongues swelled in mouths, but the dancers could not swallow water. Their throats were constricted by the same spasm that drove their legs. They were dying of thirst, while drowning in their own sweat. The compulsion was absolute. If a family member tried to restrain them, the dancer would fight with supernatural strength, or simply collapse into a seizure until they were released to dance again. The biology of survival had been overwritten. The city council was paralyzed. Magistrates and noblemen looked down from their balconies in horror. Law and order crumbled because there was no crime to punish, only a madness that defied all statutes. They had no playbook for this. Wealthy merchants locked their doors, burning incense to keep the bad air away. They watched the commoners writhe in the streets, convinced that this was a moral failing of the poor, a chaotic display of the lower classes losing their souls. Authorities consulted doctors, priests, and astrologers. The diagnosis was as strange as the affliction itself. The physicians claimed it was caused by hot blood boiling in the brain. The solution they proposed would turn a tragedy into a massacre. The medical consensus was bizarre. The victims just needed to get it out of their systems. The cure for dancing was more dancing. The council decided to facilitate the mania rather than suppress it. They were about to pour gasoline on the fire. They cleared a grain market to create a dance floor. They believed that if the afflicted could just dance freely, the hot blood would cool and sanity would return. It was a logical decision based on the science of the time. Carpenters were dispatched to build a wooden stage. Hammers rang out against timber, constructing a platform for the doomed. It looked like a fairground, but it was destined to become a scaffold. The infrastructure of death was being built by the state. In a stroke of tragic irony, the council hired professional musicians. Pipers and drummers were paid to play around the clock. They thought the music would help the dancers purge the illness. They had no idea what they were unleashing. The music started. The deep thrum of drums echoed off the half-timbered houses. The shrill pierce of the pipes cut through the humid air. And instead of curing the dancers, the rhythm synchronized them. The steady beat acted as a carrier wave for the hysteria. The vibration of the drums resonated in the chests of the starving and the fearful. Those who had been watching from the sidelines felt the compulsion take hold. The crowd swelled. The stage creaked under the weight of hundreds of bodies. The music didn't let them stop. It drove them harder, faster, pushing their exhausted hearts past the breaking point. The cure was killing them. Imagine the cacophony. the relentless music, the screams of those whose muscles were tearing, the weeping of children who could not reach their parents. It was a symphony of hell performed in the center of the city. The pipers played until their lungs burned. The drummers beat until their hands blistered. They were paid to cure the sick, but they were acting as executioners. The rhythm locked the dancers into a feedback loop of escalating intensity and terror. A baker left his ovens burning to join the crowd. A mother dropped her water jug and never picked it up. Identity was erased. Status meant nothing. In the swirling dust of the grain market, everyone was equal in their suffering. A priest stood on the cathedral steps, clutching his rosary until his knuckles turned white. He sprinkled holy water on the passing crowd, but the droplets sizzled on the hot stones. The devil, he feared, was dancing in the open daylight. A young boy, no older than 12, was pulled into the fray. He wasn't dancing. He was being buffeted by the crushing weight of adults. His cries were lost in the rhythmic stomping. He was a leaf caught in a hurricane. The summer heat turned the city into an oven. The stench of sweat, urine, and festering wounds became unbearable. Dust clouds choked the air, coating the dancers in a grey film. Their skin cracked and blistered, yet they kept moving. The smell of death began to mingle with the incense. It wasn't just exhaustion anymore. Bodies were failing. The physiological cost of non-stop exertion without water or food was finally being paid. The human heart is not an engine designed to run forever. One by one, the dancers began to fail. A sudden clutch of the chest, a collapse onto the hard stones. They died where they fell, trampled by those who could not stop. Strokes shattered brains, arteries burst. Healthy men and women dropped dead in mid-step. The musicians kept playing, unaware that they were providing the soundtrack for a mass die-off. The stage was now slick with fluids. Bodies were dragged away by guards, clearing space for more victims. The pile of the dead grew in the alleyways. The mortality rate rivaled the darkest days of the pestilence. 15 people were dying every single day from the sheer exertion. The authorities realized their error too late. The music was not a cure, it was a catalyst. Panic set in within the council chambers. The realization washed over them. They had built a machine that was killing their citizens. They ordered the instruments silenced. The sudden absence of drums was jarring, but the silence didn't stop the movement immediately. The rhythm was now internal, echoing in the minds of the afflicted. The wooden platforms were dismantled in shame. A new decree was issued. All public dancing was banned. But how do you legislate against a mania that resides in the mind? They ordered the worst cases to be loaded onto wagons. The destination was not a hospital, but a mountain shrine. The wagons creaked up the steep paths of the Vosges Mountains. Inside lay the survivors, twitching and moaning, their bodies broken. They were being taken to the shrine of Saint Vitus, a desperate pilgrimage to beg the saint to lift his heavy hand. Saint Vitus was the patron of dancers, but also the one believed to curse sinners with the Choreomania. The people believed they were suffering from a divine curse. Science had failed them. Only ritual remained. At the mountaintop, in the cool air of the cavern, they were given red shoes and small crosses. Priests performed exorcisms. The change in atmosphere, the drop in temperature, and the power of ritual began to do what medicine could not. Slowly, the fever broke. The twitching subsided. The exhausted survivors fell into deep, coma-like sleeps. Down in the city, the streets were finally quiet. The dust settled. But the silence that followed was heavier than the noise that had preceded it. Strasbourg emerged from the summer of 1518, traumatized. The market square was scrubbed of blood, but the memory remained. Empty chairs at dinner tables, shops that would never reopen. The city had survived, but it had looked into the abyss of human fragility. Historians and scientists have argued for centuries. Was it ergot poisoning from moldy rye bread? Was it a cult? Modern psychology points to something else: a mass psychogenic illness. A shared stress so severe it broke reality. Fear is contagious, we know this. But in 1518, fear became kinetic. It bypassed the conscious mind and took control of the motor functions. It proves that the human mind is a powerful engine, capable of driving the body to its own destruction. It is easy to look back at the dancing plague and see only medieval superstition. We tell ourselves we are too rational for such things. We have science, we have medicine, we have screens to distract us. But are we really so different? Look at our own world. We see contagions of emotion spread instantly across digital networks. Panic buying, social hysterias, trends that consume millions in days. The medium has changed, but the mechanism of shared delusion remains exactly the same. The dancers of Strasbourg are dust. But the rhythm that drove them, the terrifying power of the collective mind to override reality, that rhythm is still playing today. We just have to listen closely enough to hear it.